the performance you can have when your brain is in check versus the performance you can have when it's not in check is the difference between everything. Like everyone is really good at the high level, but not everyone is mentally tough and mentally there, like where they need to be.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Amanda Bruse. A quick reminder for those of you that are fans of this show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And if you like the video content, subscribing to the YouTube channel. This helps the show get discovered organically and will continually to help me to bring on amazing guests. For your convenience, there's now timestamps in the show notes, so you can feel free to jump around to the part that interests you most, although I always recommend listening to the episode in its entirety. Amanda Bruse is a Jiu Jitsu black belt under Atos co-founder Andre Galvao. She studies psychology at UCSD, runs her own business, Kimono Boutique, and will be competing in the ADCC trials later this year. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Without further ado, Amanda Bruse.
Just this one time.
Yeah. All right, Amanda. Third attempt here. I appreciate you so much bearing with me. The technical errors are completely out of my wheelhouse. So I appreciate you taking the time again to be back on the show and talk about everything. So thank you.
Of course. Happy to be here for a second/third time.
And just so you know, downstairs I have a Board and Brew sandwich, completely untouched, ready to go. So the fact that I am here and not there, I hope that means a lot to you, because
it does. Because I saw you train too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're hungry.
This is a fasted post-training recording. So
no,
we'll see
actually,
how it goes.
You should be clear-headed then, right? Isn't that what fasting's supposed to do?
So ironic that you said that. We were downstairs and I was like, I really want to eat this sandwich, but if I don't know if this is like just me, if it's placebo or whatever, but I swear when I eat like a whack of carbs after training, it does make me just, I'm like, either I want to take a nap.
Time.
100%,
yep,
right?
Yep.
Okay,
it's
cool.
Nap time.
So we're on the same page there, but
yes, not just you.
Yeah, I will start with the question that we've ran through 2 separate times and gotten 2 separate answers, because I think it's a good one, and it's a great place to start. So who was Amanda before Amanda found Jiu Jitsu?
Yeah, okay. For the third time. No, before I found Jiu Jitsu, I started training when I was like 16 years old, and before that I was definitely riddled with a lot of different problems. I had a hard time at that age. So from ages like 12 to 16, I just had a multitude of things going on. I had a ton of anxiety, depression. I had a lot of social anxiety. I was struggling with an eating disorder. So before jiu-jitsu, I was a very isolated, shy person, definitely struggling with a lot of different things. And jiu-jitsu was the biggest turning point in my entire life. So definitely made a huge impact on my life.
Do you think it was really jiu-jitsu?
I think it was. I mean, it was not like it was just the training aspect. It was everything that comes with the training. I mean, I got access immediately to an entire community of people who were really, really supportive of me and treated me like family. So I hadn't really had that before. Even when I was in school, I wasn't the kind of kid to make friends really easily. So I was in an environment where like everyone was just really positive and there was no bullying, there was no like weirdness going on. So I think it was everything that jiu-jitsu brought, as well as the mental changes that you get once you start training.
So was that like you're on the mats and you just feel the shift come over you, or what was that experience like, going from dealing with these very acute things like depression, eating disorder? These are things that are like they plague the daily experience, right? And then you're all of a sudden in this environment. What about that was the sauce that started to shift that tide?
Yeah, I think it's hard to like think of a single thing, but I think one of the main things that jiu-jitsu tends to give you is the ability to be in the present. And obviously when you're suffering from anxiety, depression, and eating disorder, whatever it may be, You're living a lot of the time in your head. You're not thinking about your environment. You're not thinking about anything except for all of those negative thoughts. So you're stuck in just a negative thought loop all day. And so jujitsu immediately gave me a relief from those thoughts because I had to be extremely present. I was learning, I was trying, like, interacting with people. So I was just like, for the first time, I had like an hour and a half where I wasn't thinking about what I was dealing with. I wasn't just thinking all those negative thoughts. So that was the first thing that allowed me to even explore anything else. I just needed like those thoughts to stop for an hour or two, you know?
And were you trying traditional like therapy approaches or anything like that at the same time?
So I had been from ages like, I would say 13, 14, I was in therapy for an eating disorder. I was in like an actual outpatient program where you go like 4 times a week and you're there for like 5 hours. I had been through a lot of treatment, but I ended up moving and I didn't have access to that treatment that I was having previously. So I had been in like a lull where I didn't have a therapist and I was kind of just on my own trying to kind of use the tools that I learned from the therapy, but I wasn't like in therapy at the time. So basically jiu-jitsu became my therapy because I had the tools that I knew I needed to use. Like I knew what I needed to do, but I was just so isolated and like sad that I just didn't have the motivation to really work on myself. I kind of just sat with those negative thoughts. So jiu-jitsu was like that kick in the butt that I needed to like have people behind me, have people supporting me, and then I was able to work on myself a lot from there.
With struggling with like an eating disorder, what does that feel like on a day-to-day? Like what is it you feel like image-based things, and so it's food, you know that food impacts image, and so it makes you want to do that. What's kind of that daily spiral?
Yeah, eating disorders are really intense, and I think there's a lot of stigma around them, and there's a lot of judgment that comes with them. But when you're in a deep eating disorder, it is hell. It is really, really terrible. I mean, at my lowest point, it's basically like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Minnesota starvation experiment. This is a pretty famous psychology experiment. Yeah, so they
Let's go.
basically they
I have
basically
not.
put a bunch of like soldiers into starvation. So it was like in the, I want to say 40s, but that could be wrong. They put them in like this camp that was in a football field and they put them through like starvation. They were still eating, but it was definitely starvation level. They were losing massive amounts of weight. And even people who didn't have like the mental eating disorder, everything they thought about was food. They started getting more aggression. Some of them even had like borderline schizophrenic episodes, and like all they could think about was food. They just obsessed about food all day. It's all they could think about, obviously, because your body's in starvation mode. And that's what it feels like when you're in an eating disorder. Like, even if there's obviously different eating disorders. I had started with basically like anorexia. So you're thinking about food, but you're not allowing yourself to have food, but it's still all you can think about. So it's all about like, how can I basically eat the littlest amount I can so that I can keep losing weight, but like, obviously you still have to eat because you're a human. So it's just like this constant battle of like, what am I going to eat? How much am I going to eat? Am I eating too much? Do I need to go work out? And then with eating disorders, a lot of the time comes body dysmorphia. So I had no idea what I looked like. I was very underweight, but in the mirror, I thought I was like very overweight. So it's a constant struggle with your own mind. So it's really, really difficult.
Hello, friends. Please let me take a minute to share my experience about why I love my sponsor, AG1. I started taking AG1 because I believe that health starts on the cellular level and believe that gut health is as important as brain health. Between surfing, strength training, jiu-jitsu, striking, and running through businesses, I need every leg up I can manage. That's why I drink AG1 every morning before starting my day, and it makes me feel confident that no matter what happens, I've done a solid for myself and my well-being. As you may know, I'm a creature of habit, and adding AG1 to my daily regimen is an easy-to-do, tasteful hack that gives me assurance that I'm building my health 365 days a year. So if you want to take ownership over your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/ABE. That's drinkag1.com/ABE. Check it out and take advantage of the offer. It's really interesting. As I was saying, as a career, I'm a trainer. My fiance was a trainer as well. That's where we met, and we talk about food all the time, right? It's a big part of our life. It's a big part of our life because of training. And my entire life has always been kind of eat to perform. Like, I'm in the training hall. I know that that's causing stress on my body. I need to eat to repair my body so that I can go and perform. It's that relationship has always been in my head, and it's just like this constant ping pong of like, did I exercise enough to constitute me eating this food or not? And my whole life, I've never thought much about it, right? It's just kind of been this in and out, like, you know what high calorie foods are and what low calorie foods are. You know that more exercise exerts more calories and less exercise, whatever. And I was talking to her about it, and she's like, you don't understand what it's like to think about food all the time. And I was like, yeah, but that's normal. Like, we're all hungry. She's like, no. It's different when it consumes your every single day. Like, I think about food from a training perspective, but she's like, sometimes that's the only thought is like, when will I get my next meal? That meal's done. When will I get my next meal? And then there's this like scarcity element to it of I need to eat because I don't know when I'm going to eat again. And it opened my eyes up to the complexity of this disease that I otherwise thought was just like bulimia, right? I just thought like eating disorder, anorexia and bulimia, that's it. And there's no other scaled or scope to this. And then when I was training a lot, you see, especially in the fitness industry, how complex it really gets, because you have NPC competitors, you have bodybuilders, you have powerlifters, you have runners, like all this stuff, and everyone's kind of doing that thing where they're eating to their sport. But I see no greater eating disorder than an NPC competitor. I mean, that's insane, dude.
Don't even get me started. I don't know if that's like a controversial opinion, but just being someone who has struggled with eating disorders my whole life, that is a free ticket to have an eating disorder, but be able to say that it's for something else. In my opinion, I'm sure there are people who have a healthy relationship with food. I just think that it's, as a woman, like it's not conducive to having a sustainable, healthy relationship with food. And you see the rebound effects after shows. Like, you lose complete control over being in tune with your body, like having, like, it's just crazy. It's so extreme.
It's super extreme. And like you said, the rebound. But I think part of the challenge here is the rebound it's like satire almost. You'll see that they're like, oh, there's so much joking around like puffing up or like getting fat again, right? Like after your show, then they go back and they eat a ton of food, and now they're at this like to them probably unhealthy weight, to the rest of the world probably more healthy, but that streamlining, like counting every single gram down to this day where you get on stage, it's anorexic people with a lot of muscle mass. Like, it just looks really, again, you're right. I think that there's some cases where people are doing this in a healthy way and they do have their head wrapped around it. But from my exposure, I feel like on the inside of the fitness industry and the outside of the fitness industry, the mindset is equal. Yeah.
I think also, just personally coming from that background, when you're competing in a sport that's purely based on aesthetics, I find that tends to lead to damaging thoughts and damaging relationship with your body. I mean, if the only way you're viewing your body is for its aesthetic purpose, I think that's just going to lead to problems. Like, that's what jiu-jitsu did for me. It was like, hey, your body is being used for something. You're an athlete. You have to eat to fuel yourself. It doesn't matter. It's not about how you look. It's about how you're performing. And I think that is a lot easier to work on developing a healthy relationship with yourself versus like, I need to get on stage to compete against these other people, and so I can have the exact perfect body in this area, and this lat needs to be even with this lat, and I need to be this lean, and you know what I mean? It's just like, that gives me anxiety just thinking about that.
What are your thoughts then, given that, like, what are your thoughts on weight cutting and that whole part of, as jiu-jitsu becomes more competitive, bigger sport, more promotions get involved, it becomes more competitive at every stage. So it's competitive on the mats, of course, in the level of jiu-jitsu you see, but now it's competitive on strategy, and part of strategy is weight cutting. So if you can cut down to weigh in and then you can bulk up another 10 pounds overnight, that is an extremely unhealthy thing for your body to go through, but it's super advantageous in a competitive setting, provided that that additional weight doesn't cost you your gas tank or something like that. So what are your feelings about that? I think you have an interesting perspective on this, because you know and can be honest about having been through having an eating disorder and participating in a sport where that's a big part of the deal.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably one of the most difficult parts for me as I became a competitor. Obviously, that wasn't my goal at first.
Right.
But it's tricky because I have to walk the line of, hey, am I going to cut weight for this, and kind of take that risk of falling back into those thoughts and having to combat those thoughts more. So am I going to choose to do that so that I can be more advantageous in this sport, or should I just honor my body and just walk in at whatever I'm going to walk in at? In my opinion, I think that I like the weight cuts where it's the same day. I think minimizing massive weight cuts is beneficial to people, whether it's making it more even or just keeping it healthier for your body. So I like ADCC where you have to weigh in the same day. I think that anytime you're trying to do massive, especially water cuts, I think it's just playing with fire. I think it's better to just fuel yourself properly and train properly, and walk around as close to your natural weight as possible. And then with women, there's a whole nother aspect where our hormones are very affected by massive weight cuts. And it can be really damaging in a lot of different ways. So I think that I understand the need for weight cuts to a certain point, but I think there's a very fine line when it comes to especially women cutting for sport.
I also just think that in general, like for these sports, there's obviously a big argument in mixed martial arts about what the right thing to do is, but I think athletically, I think it's better for the sport as a fan and a viewer when you get to watch two people that are kind of competitive at a baseline. Like when you watch two fighters walk in and you watch the weigh-in the day before and you're like, oh my God, that guy put on 24 pounds. Right. Now I'm watching the whole fight kind of going, yeah, but, or on the other side of that, then you get missed weight a lot more frequently than you would otherwise, and which is a huge disrespect to your competitor, whether it's in jiu-jitsu, it's in Muay Thai, it's in striking, MMA, whatever. When the one fighter comes up and they weigh more, it's like, that it's not because they're not tough or they don't care. They tried, but weight cutting is horrendous. And it gets to a point where like now you're talking about your actual, like your vitality, like are you going to die?
Right.
And having that incentive on the board, I agree. I think it's totally like it's just a crapshoot. And those same day weigh-ins are such a good solution to that, because you can pull the levers a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're going to compete that day. And unless you're a complete goon, you don't want to zap your body of all its energy by trying to shed a couple extra pounds. So you're going to probably walk in closer to the weight that you walk around at.
Yeah. I agree. I think as a spectator, what I want to see is two healthy, like well-hydrated, like someone who didn't just lose 30 pounds. You want to see people who are going to have a very back and forth match, who are at their best. So when you see someone who comes in with such a big discrepancy, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, they're smart. They played the rules. They kind of did what they could. But like, is it going to make for a more exciting match, or is it going to make for kind of more of a one-sided match?
Have you ever gone against a competitor where you felt like there was, on either side of it, you to them or them to you, where there was a big discrepancy in weight and it played out in the match itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely done matches where I've had plenty of day before weigh-ins where I walk in and I'm like, okay, well, they definitely cut a lot more than me, because I'm always on the side of really trying to not cut too much weight. And sometimes I walk in and I'm like, yeah, okay, so they definitely cut about 10, 15 pounds for that. And it does have an effect.
What does it feel like in the match itself? Like when you, obviously there's a psychological component to that because you visually see them before and you're like, oh shit, they're heavy. But when you're actually in the match itself, what do you notice changes in your skill set, in the way that they roll? Like, how does weight actually play out at your level of competition?
Yeah, I mean, strength definitely helps. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, if you're just bigger, stronger, it's gonna make it more difficult. I like going against bigger girls anyway. I'm always the first one to sign up for the absolute division, the first one to like go up in weight. I enjoy that. I think it's a fun challenge. And I also, I always tell myself like, hey, I didn't cut all that weight. I'm walking in feeling great. I know my gas tank's gonna be great. So I think it's tricky to deal with someone stronger, but that's kind of all the time. You could be with someone who's
Totally.
they're way stronger than you anyway. But I have noticed that like deeper into matches, especially at a higher level, like the gas tank starts to play a role. Say you're in like a 10-15 minute match. If you didn't cut weight, your chances of having your gas tank full are going to be a lot higher. So it's almost a benefit sometimes, in my opinion.
I think at your level, like for the hobbyists, when you start doing jiu-jitsu, right, people are like, don't use your strength, use your skill, which I think is a super valuable tool, especially if you come in athletic, because you will miss out on opportunities to get technical advancement because you're strong and you can just
for sure.
bully people, right? So in the beginning, super valuable piece of advice. At your level, you want to be strong because you're both technical. So if you're stronger, more dynamic and athletic, and you can do things where your proprioception and your athletic ability play into the movement, now we're talking about a big advantage over an equally skilled opponent. So when you're at Atos and you're getting ready for a big competition like a WNO or something like that, how do you adjust for those kind of things? Like, how do you utilize your athleticism? How do you challenge your athleticism? How do you utilize your strength? Because I would imagine you guys probably train harder in training than if you can tell me about your toughest match. I would imagine that the training leading up to that match, win or lose, was way harder than the match itself.
Yeah, honestly, I literally do not know a match that I've been in where I felt like it was harder than training, which is something that I take for granted all the time. And actually, a lot of people at Atos talk about this. Once you've been training there for a while and you go train somewhere else, you're like, oh, damn, we train really hard. Like, we go hard, especially. So, like, we have normal classes, and those classes are, there's a lot of non-competitors mixed in. It's not like we're killing each other every class. But when you're getting ready for a match and you're in camp at Atos and you're going to comp class, like, comp class is a war. That's the training where you're going to use all your strength. You're going to not give up any positions. You're going to go for submissions, like, not trying to break your partner, but like, you're going to go for things hard. Like, we are not trying to lose any points. We're not trying to lose any positions. And you have to have that type of really difficult training, because otherwise, once you get to the actual tournament, you're going to be like, oh shit, like, this is actually really, really difficult. Like, they're going really hard. And Atos and Galvao, he's always talks about this, like, you have to prepare for that. And if you don't, you're going to feel that pressure and you're going to feel that aggression, and it might scare you. But if that's how you train, like, frequently, you're ready for that. So we definitely go hard at comp class. And honestly, I am also training with a lot of bigger girls. So I'm not really like, oh, I shouldn't use my strength. Like, I'm training with like Rafaela Gadez, Gabby McComb, like all these girls who are brutes. So I'm going for it.
When you're training with people that are bigger and stronger than you like that, how do you, like, what intention do you bring into your training to get value out of it, knowing that you're going to get smashed? Because part of it, I would imagine, is you want to, as you get closer to a competition, anything, you want your confidence to build up to that day. Because if you go into any competitive setting and you're unsure, especially one that's physical in nature like this, you're already at a disadvantage. So each day that you get close to you need some element that's going, fuck yeah, right? I'm doing the right thing. I'm figuring this out. I'm sharpening my tools. I'm going to go for it. But when you go in there and you train with people that are bigger and stronger every single time, what do? What positions do you work to focus on those areas where you're getting better despite getting beat up all the time?
Yeah, so I think there is definitely a balance. I try to also train outside of comp class. Obviously, I think if you're only going and you're the nail all the time, I think you're gonna start to get beat down a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I don't remember who it was, but he was like, majority of your training should be with people who you can technically beat and you can kind of practice things on. Now, even though my training maybe isn't that, I definitely still have a balance. Like, I'm going to go to other classes. I'm going to train outside of comp class. I'm going to do positional training with other people more my size. I'm going to try to roll with some of the kids or some of the teenagers and people who are more my size. And every single round isn't that. But having that as a tool is actually really helpful because I'm able to be like, okay, yeah, I'm not as strong, so what can I do? What can I use that's actually going to be advantageous to me? Okay, I'm faster. I'm smaller, so I'm faster. So I'm going to figure out how can I use my speed passing to get around someone who's just really strong? How am I going to use being smaller to get out of bad positions? Because maybe it's easier for me to get my frames in. And then the other thing is, like, it's really helpful even with wrestling because it takes away a lot of the fear once you're at a tournament, right? Because say you're in an absolute division, you want to take this girl down, you don't want to be on bottom, but she's giant. If you're tentative, if you're scared, if you're, like, worried to shoot on her because she's big, you're probably going to hurt your neck or you're probably going to get sprawled on or something like that. So I use my speed, use my timing, and just go for it. And just like that actually helps me build the mental strength to like do that in a tournament.
How much of your training is mental training, like with Andre and just your whole ethos over at Atos? What are you guys talking about and thinking about for the psychological component of competition?
Yeah, I think Galvao focuses a lot on mindset, which I used to be a little resistant to it. I used to be like, like
it was woo-woo, like you're like, come on, I'm here to train. I don't want like yoga class at the end of every
Right.
trip.
I'm like, I just need to be better. Like, what are you talking about? But especially once you get at the higher level, and recently I've been dealing with this, the performance you can have when your brain is in check versus the performance you can have when it's not in check is the difference between everything. Like, everyone is really good at the high level, but not everyone is mentally tough and mentally there, like where they need to be.
So true.
It's so true. And you see it. You see people break in matches all the time. You see people who you're just like, wow, that person is just confident. Everything they're doing is just, they're going for it. They are confident in their game. They're like, you know what I mean? So every time we go in, Galvao has something to say to us. Galvao has a speech or he has something to like use his experiences to help us. And he's all about how to build your mindset and how to have the correct mindset for competition and how you need to train in order to train that exact mindset. So it's really like a lot of the training is also mental. He's like, hey, he said this today. He's like, when I Shark Tank you, I'm not trying to break you, I'm not trying to make you hate training or make you suffer. But I need you to learn how to stay calm and work under pressure because if you can't do that in training, how do you expect to do that when I'm yelling at you in the middle of a match at Worlds? Like, you're not going to even have that in your arsenal.
I think that's such an important part of, it's definitely an important part of sport in general, but I don't think that all sports beat you down the way this does in the moment of competition. You could be on a soccer pitch and be really tired and you got to push to the 90th minute. And that's a different thing in and of itself. But the fear element totally changes your physiological and psychological response. So if you're in any kind of situation, if you're in a situation you start to get scared, if you're surfing and the swell changes size while you're out there and things are bigger than you expected, it adjusts your skill of surfing pretty quickly. Even though you're a good paddler, you can swim pretty far, your cardio is fine. Now there's this other element that you didn't anticipate, and so it changes things. And when you're training, you can train all day, but then you get out of your element, you get really tired, and people are beating you down. It's different. And it's such a useful, I think it spills well beyond the mats, having that ability to be composed, especially out in public. I mean, road rage situations, for example, like just that ability to like stay
modulate
calm.
Your emotions in a tense situation.
You could probably speak to this from like I'm going to put you on the academic pedestal real quick. What is happening psychologically to our like decision making process? And this is in or out of sport, but when the element of fear presents itself.
Well, there's also it's a lot to do with your arousal level, right? So there's there's a certain level of arousal that you can hit where you're thinking clearly, but if you go beyond that, you stop being able to make conscious, correct decisions. So if you're able to modulate how aroused you're getting, as in like how hyped up or angry or anything like that, any of those really intense emotions, if you're able to modulate that into the range that's still conducive to making quick, smart decisions, being able to think while you're under pressure, that's going to be beneficial to you. But that takes you being able to, breathe correctly and get your brain into that state, So there's a lot that goes into it that takes conscious awareness to be able to change that. So if you don't have that control over that, you're going to be just like going crazy. You're going to be like all hyped up. You're going to get an adrenaline dump. You're going to react out of anger. You're going to do something that is not you thinking clearly. So you have to be able to change that. And that is something that you learn through training that, like you said, can transfer over into a multitude of other areas of your life.
Are you doing things like meditation on your own time, breath work, things like that are more like, I don't know, I don't want to call them fringe because I think that they're like super important to day-to-day life, but some people are resistant to that. I was super resistant to a lot of this stuff for a long time in my life. I really, really wish that I had introduced like meditation and breath work to when I was competing in skiing. I think it would have done wonders. But do you incorporate that kind of stuff into your own time? Is that stuff that you guys do in the academy?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely am a big advocate in meditation, breath work. I think the main thing that meditation and breath work and all of these things allow you to do is it allows you to stay present. And I think that's the key and that's the goal to any kind of performance, really, whether it's academic, it's emotional, it's sports, whatever it is if you're able to stay present, then you're able to actually make correct decisions. So for me, meditation and breath work, especially coming from someone who's dealt with anxiety, has been probably the biggest factor in me learning to modulate and regulate emotions on and off the mat. So I think I get why a lot of people are really like, oh, it's like whatever, it's like hippie, it's woo-woo. But it's, completely scientifically backed up. You can look at Wim Hof breathing, you can look at all, I love people like Joe Dispenza. The power of your mind is all there and it's all scientifically backed up. So definitely incorporate that.
I always think that the big thing for me was when the application to sport was shown. Not that I think of every single thing
you were
in
like,
terms
now
of
I'll
sport.
do it.
Right. But you are like learning how to, the best way that I ever heard it described was like the argument for meditation is kind of like if you're looking down on a highway from a bridge and you see all these cars rushing by, and they're just like every single time you see something, this different car, and you can like get stuck focusing on one and following it, but it never stops. It's just this constant thing of thoughts, and that's like your mind essentially. The cars represent thoughts that are just like ping, 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 nonstop all day long, never quit. Whether you're training, you're doing other stuff, and learning to see the distance there, and that you have a little bit more autonomy over which car you look at. And letting cars go too, not getting stuck tracking them the whole time, right? Because thoughts can take over our whole like outlook. When I was explained that way, I was like, oh, maybe there's something in here for me, because I could just spiral. I could get stuck on a thing or like something could keep me down, and I would just get sucked into it. And learning that it was just like I am not attached to whatever that is was really big.
Yeah.
And that's when I really started to read and think about it from like a sports psychology standpoint. There are no top performers who are really actually competitive at the highest level who don't work on their mindset. It doesn't exist. Look at any sport. They are paying someone to help them see more clearly and think more clearly. And I think that meditation, whatever form people choose to do it in, how do you meditate?
Yeah, different types of ways. I like the traditional kind of clear your mind, sit with, and just kind of let everything be still kind of meditation. I also do a lot of visualization type of meditation where instead of just thinking of nothing, I'm thinking of a scenario, something positive, something that I want to happen. And that for me is a form of meditation as well. And then breath work alone is a form of meditation. Yep. So I think when people hear meditation and they think just I need to sit still, close my eyes, and not think of anything. That's why people are so resistant to it. But there's tons of different types of things that are very tied to meditation and different ways that you can do it that maybe work for you a lot better.
What was the inflection point where you decided to give that a shot?
I don't know why I was so resistant to it. Because I'm such a highly anxious person, I was just like, well, I'm not just going to sit there and not think of anything, and that's just stupid. That's not going to fix my problems.
Yeah.
But once I started competing at a higher level, I was like, okay, so maybe I need to work on this because I don't want to feel this adrenaline dump every time I go to compete that I'm battling with for like 2 weeks before the competition. Like, I
Right.
want to be able to like put this in check and put it to the side and go about my life. So I really started getting into it, like maybe committing to it like a year ago. But it got to the point pretty quickly where I was able to be like, okay, that's enough of that thought. I'm going to shut that off right now. And then I could actually shut off versus my entire life, which was, okay, that thought shut off. Now what next anxious thought is coming? What other
Right.
negative thing? What other thing that's leading me down further into the spiral?
Jiu-jitsu it's interesting hearing you talk about all these different facets of it, but how it brought you into this like present state. Because I talk about this a lot, that I think that anything that is somewhat extreme in nature, like being out in nature is a good example. If you're in like a hostile environment, so like if you're skiing backcountry or if you're climbing solo or you're on like a long hike, anything where the stakes are elevated just by the nature of what you're doing. Jiu-jitsu, another good example, that even though you trust your teammates and stuff, there is an element of unknown, right? You could get your arm snapped, you get your elbow hyperextended. We've all had a black eye, a split lip, a puffed ear, right? All this stuff happens. And because of that, you don't have the luxury to not pay attention by default.
Exactly.
So you could be fucking all over the place, anxious, crazy, whatever person. And when you get in there, good luck maintaining that, because you're just going to be on your back getting your shit passed and someone's knees on your sternum and now you're getting choked out. So you learn very quickly that like, wow, okay, it's advantageous to check that shit at the door no matter how my day is going.
Yeah, that's actually funny because that's what drew me to jiu-jitsu. Like, I was powerlifting before. That was my sport. I was like a powerlifter. I was competing. But like, you can go into the gym and go through a whole powerlifting workout and think about your problems the entire time. Because there's only
Literally.
about 30 seconds for each set where you like have to focus kind of, and the rest of the time you can be in your head. But the second you start rolling, there is no possible way you can be thinking about anything else unless you want to get smashed the entire time, and most of us don't. So
Right.
it's no matter how bad a day I've had, like I've been to training on some really bad days, but the second I start actually training, I'm like, there we go, it's gone. There I am, present.
Do you feel like, so a lot of times bad feelings, so depression or being in like a dip, just naturally, like all our hormones regulate, right? So you could be the happiest person in the world. You're gonna have days where you're like the
Of course.
sun's not shining for you.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of things, fitness has never been like this for me, but there are things you don't want to do because you're down. And there is this weird thing, you probably know the term for it, where like there's like comfort in perpetual unhappiness to some degree, where
Yes.
you can be down and
Yes.
you're like, I don't, it's like the kid who's pouty and you're like, I'll give you a cookie. And they're like, I don't want a cookie. And
Yes.
they do want a cookie, but they're like, no, I'm going to be sad right now. And when you're like that, there's things you don't want to do, for sure. I've always felt like martial arts, it's like the thing I definitely want to do.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because with that being said, like people are addicted to negative emotions. It's a very well-known psychological phenomenon. Like we tend to cling on to those negative emotions and almost become addicted to them to the point where over time that can be what leads to depression in my mind is just a repetition of negative emotions that you're holding on to. But when I'm feeling like that, I don't want to do anything that's good for me, or at least in the past, I was kind of self-sabotagey. I'd be like, no, I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want to journal. I don't want to do this. But I've always wanted to go train. Like, no matter what, I always want to get in the gym because I just know that it's going to make me feel better.
And there's like a collective Now I'm getting like super out there, but
No, I'm here for it.
There is definitely like a collective energy when you're in the academy training that's like, yeah, I'm dealing with it too. You know, it's unsaid, but you can just see like not everyone is having a bad day and that's why they train jiu-jitsu. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Right.
But when you're there and you're all training super hard, there's this group like positive outcome from everyone being there where you're like, damn, like I'm feeling shitty and I showed up and they're having a tough day, but they're here too. Okay, cool. Like everyone checked it and they came in anyway to support each other, because you all know that if you don't show up, nobody gets better. Like you all need each other to be there to train, because you don't train with a barbell. You could go to a gym that's completely empty and you can become a better power lifter. You cannot go to an empty academy and become better at jiu-jitsu. Doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things about jiu-jitsu is that you are forced to rely on others, and you know that they're there for support. So like the first gym I ever went to, it was almost all hobbyists. And after the first couple times, you know, I'm analytical, so I'm analyzing people. I'm like, hey, what's this guy doing? What's he look? Oh, he looks kind of like he's going through something. And as I was there, you know, everyone's opening up after class. Oh, yeah, I'm struggling with this, blah, blah, blah. And it's literally like this big safe place where, like, whether you're going there for sport or not, like, you're going there to release certain emotions, and you're going there to do that in a group of other people who are also doing that. So like there's this weird unspoken, like you said, support system there where we all know like everyone's going through something, but we're all showing up there every time.
And there's this element to it that is more of like a evolutionary thing, I think. That's the contact part of it. Like we as humans we benefit from physical contact. That's a nurture
so
part.
Weird,
I know.
Like fighting each other, but
totally.
I know what you're saying.
And it does sound like this is another one of those things. Like if you try to describe jiu-jitsu to people, they're like, what? And then if you show it to them, they're like, okay. They're like,
this doesn't make any more sense.
Right? You're like, no, but it's.
But it's fun, though.
Like,
but you'll really like it.
Yeah. But there is this, I think, the physical contact part of it. Again, it's something that separates it from football. Well, that's not true because football's contact, but
kind of though.
You know, like weightlifting or trail running or some other things that are endorphin producing positive things that increase your longevity. They're good for you. But the physical touch part of it, even though that's not the goal, it's not that you're going in there and touch a bunch of people.
Yeah. I know what
but that element of it, I think that there is like a developmental psychology part of that to where as children, if you have good parents, the first thing that happens is you're held. It's like that you come out of the womb and you're held, and then you're held and swaddled for like years. And then as you get older, you separate from that and you go out in the world. And there's something about that too that I think there's got to be some positive psychology spillover benefit of that also, that maybe that's not even why people go. I would imagine a lot of people don't go for that. Yeah. But you are benefiting from it, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, I think that's actually very true, because when I'm thinking about like when I first started getting into jiu-jitsu, I was like super isolated. Like I probably wasn't getting hugs from too many people. Like I was just alone all the time, kind of by my own kind of choice. Yeah. But even that contact really did something for me. It was like being connected with people, like actually connected. And then, you know, the shaking the hands after class, hugs, like even the violence part of it, like just having physical connection is something that innately as people, like we need. I mean, you see it in babies. Yeah. If babies do not get that, it leads to an immense amount of psychological disorders and problems that they don't even necessarily ever recover from. So obviously being a human, like physical connection is important.
I know it's a strange part of it to think about that, especially because of the violence component, like you said. I mean,
because of the slight part where we're all trying to break each other's arms and stuff.
Right. Like you're not just, it's not hugs. Like, there's hugs. Right. You know, it's like, hey, good training. And that part's great too. But it is the threat of the uncertain and the fact that someone, and you know this more when you're first starting, because you just get trounced. Like
Just
when you start, it doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how big you are. We have big military dudes from Camp Pendleton that come in and train with us, and like on paper they're fucking scary. And when you're brand new, you're brand new. You don't understand the skill of the technique, and so you get smashed. And we've all gone through and go through it. I go through that every single day I train, right? It's not like you go through that and it stops. But that happening over and over, it's this constant like humility that you have to embody, that I'm not as big as I think I am, not as strong as I am, not as fast as I am. And no matter what, at any moment, there is always someone better, unless you're the best in the world, right? There's and we were talking about this last time, but when someone has an ego in there,
that's going to get checked really quickly.
Real fast.
I think that's really important for like a lot of different, I'm not saying men, but I'm just saying a lot of men could benefit from having that kind of awareness and losing a little bit of that egocentric kind of personality. Like, hey, there's a girl over there who's probably going to tap you out like 5 times in your round. You know what I mean?
I think I side with you on this, and I side with you from experience. Like when I was that exact thing. It was like I came from an Olympic weightlifting background, snatch and clean and jerk well in excess of my body weight. I was by measurable metrics strong, and I embodied that. It was everything about who I was. And I went in and I got absolutely throttled by someone half my size. And I left really confused. Like I had been a fan of martial arts and the UFC and Jiu Jitsu for so long. I just like never put it on my priority list. And I walked out of there just like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
And it is my favorite thing to watch in real time. It's my favorite thing to watch in real time.
It's my favorite thing to do. That's like one of my favorite hobbies is like when new guys come in or something and you can tell that they just have an ego. And I'm like, especially Nogi, because they don't know anything. They don't know if I'm a black belt or anything. And I'm just like, hi, like how are, like 125 pounds, like blah, blah, blah. And then I just go hard. But it's funny because people have different reactions. Like there's some people who are like, okay, that's cool. I want to learn more about this. And that's really interesting. And there's some people who are like, oh, like screw this. I don't want to do this. So I feel like it does kind of force you to come to that decision where you're like, hey, am I going to let my ego win, or am I going to learn to drop it and kind of see what this is about? Well,
it gives you the opportunity. It says, hey, here's your ego. What do you think about that? And I agree. I think any of us that do this after day one, right? We've answered that in a very specific way, like with curiosity. And then the hundreds of, probably in your case, thousands of people that you see come through the doors and quit, they, for whatever reason, weren't built for it. And I hope they find it somewhere else. I hope they go to, a boxing class and they just get a liver shot at the first time and dropped and go, oh my God. But it definitely isn't for everyone, which is so unfortunate because of your experience. Like this case study is exactly why I'm such a fan of it.
Which is so many people's experience too. I mean, I've talked to so many people who like you wouldn't even recognize them before they started training, or like especially with like addiction or something like that. Like I've seen so many people who this has just been completely life-changing. So I feel like kind of a fanatic when I'm trying to be like, hey, come train, like blah, 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 you'll love it. But like I really mean it out of the kindness of my heart because I think it's going to help everyone.
Yeah, it's definitely like the parallels to religion are hilarious because like I'm personally not a religious person, but then I catch myself just like spitting the gospel.
Oh yeah, like exactly. I'm proselytizing jujitsu literally constantly. Like I feel like, not to hate on vegans, but like I'm just saying, like I feel like I'm like no, you have to try this diet. Like I swear to God, you'll feel completely different afterwards. Like,
dude, I was so when I met my fiance, she had been a vegan for 7 years, like hard, dude, like hard vegan, and I was like, fuck it, I'll be a vegan. And so overnight, like I went to bed, and I was competing Olympic weightlifting, and part of me was curious, like, can I maintain this output while not eating meat? So I went to bed, I woke up, and I was like, dude, I'm reading the back of like every single thing. If it has milk powder in it, I'm not eating it. If it has anything that was not plant-based, I wouldn't eat
Yeah,
it.
you went
And
full vegan
no, full,
immediately.
like 200%. And I did
Oh my
that
gosh.
for, I think it was 10 months until I walked out of the gym one day and I walked by, there's this place in LA called Sugarfish. That's like a
Okay.
awesome
Wait, I think
sushi
I've heard
spot.
of this. Okay, I've heard of it.
And I
Yeah.
walked by it and then I did like the back step and I
You were
went
like,
and I was like, "Arr!" And I ate all this fish.
dude, that's funny. I was vegetarian for 5 years, and I was vegan
Yeah.
for like 6 months. But I was vegan, and I remember one day I tried to leave the house, and my dad, who's like, my grandma's from Germany, and we're like dairy farmers and like whatever. He's like, you're not leaving this house till you drink this glass of milk. Like, I'm done. Like, this is, you're not doing this anymore.
Were you
But
powerlifting as a vegetarian?
I did, yeah. So actually, I was vegetarian from like 12 to like about 16. I started doing some strongman stuff,
Nice.
and yeah, it was
Like
really cool,
Atlas
actually.
stones
Like
and
Atlas
throwing
ball,
kegs, yeah.
everything, yeah. And I don't know, like I wasn't eating the healthiest anyway as a vegetarian, because you can eat like trash as a vegetarian. Like it doesn't mean anything. Like all
No.
you're doing is not eating meat. So
Right.
not like I was eating that healthy, but I was just like, I wonder if I start eating meat if my deadlift's gonna go up.
I know those
And
thoughts trickle in.
guess what? It did.
So. I mean, it goes without saying, you can do it. And
Absolutely.
there are high level there's
Of course.
professional athletes at the peak level of every sport that are vegan. So
Yeah, for
it can
sure.
be done.
You can. It just takes a lot of
Effort.
correct effort, right? And I was like 16. I just didn't know how to eat properly. It was easier
Exactly.
for me to get the nutrients I needed eating meat. But I do remember the first time I ate fish, I cried for like an hour.
Like you were sad for the
Like I was
fish
so sad. My dad came in the kitchen and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just like I feel really bad right now."
it's such a so being vegan was the best case study in dogma for me, like of all, just because you by default you are drinking the hell out of the Kool-Aid. And
yeah.
I'm reading books about, like animal cruelty and the environment. And you just like, you just suck it all in so much to justify
Yeah.
your choices. And then I can only speak for myself. You're kind of like poo-pooing on everyone else. Like you go to a restaurant with your friends, but you call ahead and you're like, "Hey, can you do a vegan dish for me?" And then you get there and they're like, "Hey, what does everyone want to eat?" And you're like, "Oh, I already got my meal on.
Yeah,
I already got it figured out."
Yeah.
Like so fucking healthy.
Yeah,
And,
I've never met someone who's not passionate and who's also vegan. You know what I mean?
Right. No, totally. It's like CrossFit. It's
Right.
like
Yeah,
or
right.
Jiu Jitsu.
Or jujitsu. I'm
yeah.
sorry, but ours is better. Okay.
Yeah, way better. Yeah, and more versatile. But yeah, you
Yeah.
hit that point. I think for a lot of people where it's like I started to just miss choice.
Yeah.
Like, I'll
It's
eat
pretty
vegan meal
limiting.
now. And
Yeah.
what you said about building strength is not that it can't be done, but it's easier when you can eat something that's like this big and it has 40 grams of straight up
For
protein
sure.
in it.
Yeah. And then for me also, like, it was just kind of like in my eating disorder, I used veganism and vegetarianism a lot to be like, "Oh, I can't go here. I can't eat this. Oh, I don't know
Right.
about that." Like, so for me, releasing those kind of food rules was also like an added thing for like recovery. Because then I couldn't be like, "Oh, I can't go to this restaurant. I can't eat this, blah, blah, blah." So for me, there was another layer to it. But now I'm kind of on the opposite side where I'm very animal based. I'm very like grass fed meat and butter and eggs and everything. And I feel really good. So I think there is something to having a
That's-
diet that works for your body. And for me, that just works better.
I think that's the most important part about diet is one, do like blood work with a doctor and actually find out what your blood. I get asked all the time by friends, former clients, stuff like that, like how should I eat? And I don't know.
I'm like, I don't know. What does your
I
body
don't know.
like? What works for you?
You need to know a couple baseline things. Like you need to get blood work done and find out what is your body even? Where is it even at? And then from there, you can start to make adjustments and eat well for you because a ton of, let's say that I just adopt Amanda's diet because I'm like, damn, she's a high class competitor. She's eating this, and this, and I do it. And it caused my cholesterol to go through the roof. Like that's not
Right.
ideal for me. I should know
Right.
what's doing what, but you have to do what you're doing and experiment. You have to try these different things to see like, what makes me feel like I can just like hit it every single day and not get fatigued? And what makes me feel like I'm walking into training just hitting the wall, you know?
Yeah. I think there's too much, of course there is, but there's too much online and people just being like asking everyone, like asking the entire internet, going on Instagram, what diet should I do? What's this? What's this? Like, you need to sit down with, obviously, blood work is great, but you need to experiment with your body and just see what works. Trial and error, A and B. Like, it took me years to figure out the foods that actually made me feel good, that didn't hurt my digestion. But if you're just following every Instagram guru, can't speak, and what they're doing, it's never going to work because it's not
and there's so much of it. There's so much. Yeah.
It's crazy. And I was a nutrition major, and like, honestly, I switched from it because what put me off was just the whole industry of nutrition in general. It's just, I really just think people need to get more in touch with themselves and with their bodies. I think that's the basis of a lot of this stuff, whether it's mindset or diet. I think it's about stop relying on everybody else's experience and figure out what your experience is. And I think that's really the most important thing.
Well, and the other side of that, 'cause I agree with you. I think that we should all be putting a little bit more responsibility on ourselves to solve it, right? And by solve it, I mean by actually trying things and sticking to aim for academia, don't aim for what's trending, because you're going to get responses based on how influencers want to get likes and views. Right. That is the goal, because that's the currency. If you have likes and views, you can leverage it for partnerships.
Right.
So they are going to act in a way that propels those two things. And the reality is, telling someone that they should go figure it out on themselves is the worst way to have either of those metrics. You're not going to make money.
You're not going to get popular by being like, I don't know, go figure it out.
Right. But we need to do that. And I mean, as much as we're like kind of trashing like veganism and vegetarianism.
Yeah, if it works for you.
The important part is it was part of you getting to where you're at. And so as much as it's easy to like demonize these things, me being vegan for a year taught me so much about what I actually want to do for my nutrition. So that, I think, is a perfect example of like why people should be invested in trying things and being okay with failing too. Like, absolutely, you can make adjustments and you can fix it or change it going forward.
Yeah, I've done so many different styles of diets, like whether it's like, I think I even did Whole30 at one point because I read about it, like, and I was like, wait, why am I, like, it's good to experiment, but why am I just following the advice of everyone else? And so whatever, all of those things led me to actually find a diet that works for me, to where I can actually feel good and actually perform. But there is still something to be said about working with a nutritionist if you're doing specific things like weight cuts, I would say.
That, I mean, definitely.
That's a little different thing, but
this, I mean, now that we've talked about nutrition, what is, from your experience of having dealt with the eating disorder, recovered from that, competing at a high level, being in multiple sports too, and two very different sports, right? Like powerlifting and then strongman and Jiu Jitsu are completely different expressions of body mechanics. So what do you find now for you works for you in terms of food?
Oh, in terms of food? Yeah. So like right now I'm doing kind of a long cut actually, because I'm going to be doing ADCC trials and they just switched the weight classes. So Wonderful. It's the first time where I've had to actually, but it's good because now we have 3. So God bless that. But it's for the first time in a while where I've had to slowly cut down a lot of body weight. So what I've kind of figured out is, like, for me, nutrient dense and kind of animal based works really well for me. So I'm a big, like, people hate on dairy. I love dairy, eggs, high quality meat, seafood, fruit, not even that many vegetables. Like, I'm pretty much kind of on that sphere of things, but it makes sense for me. Like, I'm German. We come from dairy farmers. My whole family was like, that's what they were eating. So that's kind of what works for me. I do work with a nutritionist right now, just to kind of fine tune macros and stuff like that, so that I don't have to think about it too much. Because coming from,
is this for the, like, more for the cut element?
Yeah, just for the cut. But I'm still able to eat like how I like to eat. But like for me, it's helpful to have a meal plan as far as macros because coming from the eating disorder background, sometimes when I've cut weight in the past, I go too hard and I get a little too rigid with it and I get a little bit too intense with it and I start getting a little bit fearful of eating enough and fueling myself. So for me, it helps to have someone be like, hey, you can actually still eat this much while you're cutting weight. Cutting weight doesn't mean you need to starve yourself and be suffering the entire time. And if anything, that's actually the wrong way to be doing it. So for me, that's been helpful.
So are you, how are you measuring your caloric expenditure? Do you use like a Whoop band or anything like that so that you contrast that against what her prescription is?
Yeah, so I do use a Whoop sometimes. I'm not as religious about it. I kind of more go from body feel a little bit. So like I know because I've measured with my Whoop like what a hard comp class is, what like a cardio session is probably going to be, and we'll modulate based on that. I do like a lot of those biometric kind of data things. I think sometimes I'm not convinced on the full accuracy of everything.
Fair,
and I don't want to be too obsessive with every training session to where it's taking me out of focusing on the things that I need to be focusing on, which is just like training and getting better in jiu-jitsu. But I have used it as a tool in the past to at least get a baseline. I think it's the same thing with macros. You don't have to count macros forever because at some point you're going to learn kind of just how things are over that experience.
Totally.
Like, I can tell you what this meal is going to be approximately because I've tracked macros in the past, so it's not like I have to be super tedious for the rest of my life.
I think that that's so well said, and it's something I've talked a lot with clients about too, with like using a Whoop or an Oura ring to get an understanding. Because like you said, the data, it's not 100% accurate, but what it gives you is a reliable delta. Like if Amanda wears it every day for 7 days, you have a pretty good snapshot, especially if you're an athlete and you're super tied into your recovery and everything like that. You have a pretty good snapshot of where you're at. And then from that, you go, okay, generally, I'm only sleeping 6.5 hours. I'm going to try to bump that up to 7. And now you know you're going to get a payout from it. But it doesn't mean you have to wear the ring for the rest of your life or track every single calorie that you burn at every single training class, because at your level, most classes are going to be the same. If you're super deconditioned and you only go to like one class or once in a while, that numbers could be all over the place. You don't know the structure of it. But when you're as regimented as you are, I think that those things become really valuable tools, but again, not mandatory for like the long haul.
Right, because I mean, some people get too obsessed with everything, but at the end of the day, like nothing you're doing is going to be that accurate. Even if you're counting out your macros and you're weighing things, like it's not even going to be 100%. Nothing's 100% accurate. So you still have to learn how to rely on your body and how you're feeling, and you know, all of those types of things. And I think sometimes those tools get taken to a point where you kind of develop a disconnect with how you're actually feeling, because you're literally just like looking at your phone like, oh, well, what did my Whoop say? Like, I'm tired, but what did my Whoop say? You know what I mean?
Dude, okay, so the strain metric, I have such like confliction with it, because I think that it has good intentions if you are a high performing athlete trying to regulate your recovery and you're going and you really don't know, right? Like sometimes if you're overtraining, it is hard to get a read on like what's going on. But what happens is so many people begin to let the Whoop tell them how they feel instead of assessing how they feel and checking with the Whoop to see if it's on point.
Yeah.
Like if you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm tired, and you look at your Whoop and it's like, you're ready to go. And you're like, what?
I've had that so many times. And the other
That's
thing
not
is
a
like,
thing.
Right. And it's like, hey, I can tell you when I'm overtrained because one, my emotions are going to be dysregulated, but my Whoop's not going to tell me that. Right. So like, I can't just rely on the fact that Whoop said I had great sleep last night, even though I woke up feeling like shit. Like I can't just rely on the app for that. So I have to be able to use my body. And like, that's part of being an athlete, right? Is being in tune with your body.
And if we're being completely honest, the measured metric is heart rate. All the other stuff you get with it is marketing. So you're getting your body doesn't have a strain, it has a heart rate. So if you get a strain reading, that's Whoop's perception and marketable tool based on this thing that undulates and varies throughout the day. So like if everything you do is just based on your heart rate and you're not taking into account fatigue in other areas, then like it's only useful to some degree, you know.
Right, and I think it's especially difficult with jiu-jitsu. I mean, like, you can
So tough.
factor in heart rate all you want, but you can't factor in, like, someone going really hard on a Kimura or putting a ton of pressure on you, or all these different things that are so variable every single class that your heart rate variation is not actually going to tell you.
How are you strength training? This cut phase is interesting to me because it's you know that you're decreasing your calories over time strategically.
Yeah.
But how are you regulating your strength and conditioning, and how does that change as you get closer to ADCC trials?
Yeah, so the main thing was I like to lift heavy. I like my powerlifter roots, right? Like, I love
Shout out powerlifting
exactly,
roots.
right? Man, I tried Olympic lifting for a while. Hard. But
I like cry when I look back at videos of where my
just
strength
crazy.
was, but I remind myself, like, I like to train jiu-jitsu. That's what I care about now. And then I only cared about the bar. But I like unracked just to do like front squats the other day, and I was like, holy shit. I used to just clean and jerk this like it was just like on a warm-up set.
Yeah.
And I racked it, and I just sat and had a sad moment for myself.
15-year-old me deadlifted more than me now deadlifts. Like, it's
okay.
wild.
It's okay.
I know. I need like a support.
It's all about application.
Exactly.
What can you use it for? But back,
Right.
I digress.
Yeah.
So
No.
what's your regiment now, and how will that change going to ADCC?
So, of course, like I said, I like my heavy lifts. As the cut starts to get more deeper into the cut, I've definitely added a lot of cardio. I've become a runner, so that's something that I never thought I would do.
I like your alter when you talk about you talking about yourself. Your other version is pretty cool. It's a really weird psychological thing that everyone does. It's kind of like how you have a dog voice. You know, we talk to a dog that has a stupid voice that we never use anywhere else. But I like your other that talks about you. It's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I started running though. But I started running. I
feel bad
definitely
for you.
Still do. Listen, I actually, when I first started it, I hated it until I realized that I should stop trying to run fast and I should just run for time. And now I enjoy it. So it's actually been helpful.
Now run with your mouth closed.
I do. I only nose breathe.
Good. Okay. Cool.
Oh, trying to come at me with the elitist breath.
No,
work
I
now.
know. Okay, good. Just
Already
wanted,
on
I was
top of
testing
it.
you. I was testing you. Okay, we're good.
I've gone down the rabbit holes on YouTube,
Good.
trust me.
Solid.
But yeah, so I haven't been lifting quite as heavy, but I'm a firm believer in the basics and never letting go of all your basic movements. I'm always going to squat, bench, deadlift, pull up, and then obviously
true power lifter.
Seriously, like right to the basics. Obviously, I try to add a lot of small muscle movements too, like after being in this sport a few years, I've had wear and tear on certain joints, certain injuries. So I'm always trying to do like mobility and recovery. So as the cut gets deeper, it's just going to be more about increasing capacity as far as volume, like lowering the weight, higher reps, adding some more cardio and things like that, but still keeping all the compound movements that I think are just important for overall strength. I'm not a huge fan and advocate of like hyper specific sports training. I do like, of course, like proprioceptive stuff and I think certain things are helpful, but I do think that just having a good baseline of your basic lifts also goes a far way.
I think that specificity is a really interesting topic in training, because if you look at, I think especially with social media, specificity has become a little convoluted, because if you do something that looks like the sport, right? Like, let me use an example of, you're in my closed guard and I grab your collar in your sleeve, right? So we have this like retracted shoulder position with two grips. And if I were to go and I grab like, I set up two cables on a cable machine and I cross them and I'm holding them like this, and then I'm like getting on my back, you could shoot a video like that and put it online and be like, top 3 exercises to retain your guard, right? And you're like doing this, and then people that, no harm, no foul, don't understand strength and conditioning or kind of are starting jiu-jitsu, they go, oh my God.
Yeah, I'm sure
that's how they do it.
Yeah.
I have to start doing pull-ups with my gi or I'm never going to get stronger. But the reality is the sport is going to teach you those elements. Like, by doing the gripping, that's going to build gripping in that position. But if you're not pulling, hip hinging, pressing, pushing, and then developing like a really strong posterior chain, it doesn't matter. Like those are not going to ever be able to be expressed to the degree that you could if you are strong at a baseline.
Absolutely. I mean, like, you have to have a strong base in those actual movements, and you have to have those muscle groups be strong in order to actually be able to utilize them in the more kind of finessed ways that we do in jiu-jitsu. Like, it doesn't make sense to try to go in and recreate all of these hyper specific little tiny motions that occur in training, because there's thousands of them anyway. Like, I'm doing thousands of unique movement patterns that I'm never going to be able to recreate. So why not just get a really strong base in those muscle groups that are going to be utilized, and then go to training and have them work how they need to work?
I think when people are considering like the specificity part of it, what they should do to their training is like get yourself into rotation, get yourself into planes that you don't usually use, because you're going to be pushed into them in jiu-jitsu, right? So if you have a really strong deadlift, but laterally you're super weak and you're doing stand-up, all someone has to do is change an angle on you, and you are now in a plane that you don't typically build strength in, but you can't get those planes strong if you don't have strong baseline movements to begin with, which are those like foundational compound movements that are tried and true.
Yeah, and so I think like there also probably is different advice for like, if you're a hobbyist, like, I don't think you need to go in and start just doing hyper-specific movements and trying to do those things. I think if you're at the highest level and, like you're one of the top competitors in the world and you're working with someone and you want to work on some of those more unique movement patterns or whatever, of course, that could be beneficial to you. But I think for the masses, like, traditional strength training is always going to be very applicable in jiu-jitsu.
And from talking to, like, top physios that actually work with grapplers. Like, I talked to Chris Weidman's physical therapist, and then Colabate's physical therapist who helped him come back from his knee. These guys are like, strength is what helps reduce the risk of injury. It's that first. That first helps reduce the risk. It doesn't eliminate it, because we're all doing sports, and someone smaller than you could tear your ACL. It just can happen. Strength helps reduce the risk of injury. And then, to your exact point, at the high level, specificity to areas of identified weakness are what allows that athlete to then perform more. So maybe a hobbyist doing like something really specific that you would find in your program wouldn't be the most beneficial for them. If that's going to give you an edge at ADCC trials against another world-class competitor, like, you bet your ass you're going to do that.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that obviously there's so many different trains of thought with this, but as you get to the higher and higher level, that's when you really start to analyze certain things and can add in other alternate types of training. But totally agree that strength is never a weakness, and the basics when you're starting out is really important.
What do you do when you're not in this kind of window? Like, if you are in your competition season, but you're not trying to get to a super specific weight class, or it's not like ADCC trials or WNO, but it's like something maybe a little more local or regional. Are you always on kind of like a baseline strength and conditioning program and eating, or are you thinking about it this way too, with a nutritionist and with structured programming? And
yeah, I mean, when I'm like off season, like, my natural diet is pretty conducive to being an athlete anyway. Like, I just generally eat pretty healthy. I think everything's pretty much handled, and I walk around at pretty much the same weight. I'll check in with my nutritionist, and he'll be like, hey, what are you walking around at here? Is everything feeling good? And I'm like, yeah. So I've kind of learned how to eat after a few cuts. I know kind of the style of eating that I like. And then as far as working out, I modulate it based on training. I'll be a little more chill with it. Like, I'm always going to be lifting, and I'm always going to be trying to increase aerobic capacity and getting better in all those ways, but I won't be as intense about it. Like, if I have a heavy week at jiu-jitsu, I'll probably lift less. If I am not training quite as much, maybe I want to be in the gym and put some heavier lifts up. So I kind of just will modulate it like that. But I'm generally I haven't worked with a specific PT for my own programs. I usually just do my own programming because I enjoy it, and I've been lifting for a while.
Okay, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, but I'm also interested in working with someone at some point too. I think it would be interesting to have a coach. It's really nice as an athlete to have someone kind of just setting everything up for you.
Yeah.
It's really nice. I realized that when I first got the nutritionist because I was so opposed to it. I was like, I know nutrition, like obviously I can do it myself, but just having it done for you is like it takes such a big thing out off your plate, and it's just like you can focus on what you need to focus on.
Well, like you said, you said earlier, like at the high level, everyone's good, right?
Right.
But the difference between good and the best is the mental side of it. And if part of your bandwidth is being consumed by even doing things you like writing programs, but if it's being consumed by that, that's energy that could spent visualizing. It could be staying late and having a conversation with Galvao. There's so many different things that like it's a opportunity cost of what you're doing with your time. And
yeah, and plus you always second guess yourself you know what I mean? Like
straight up.
if you're making it, you're like, okay, but is this the best thing for me right now? It just helps to have someone else like affirm what you think or affirm your programming for you as an athlete. Obviously, too, we have other things we need to deal with. Like I'm in school, I got to deal with that. Like if I can minimize what I have to think about and I can just go in and train, that's when I feel my best.
When you go to ADCC, how do you advance to the finals? Like, what do you have to improve on between now and then in your jiu-jitsu?
So I made it to the semifinals last trials, and I had a really, really close semifinals match.
Was that the match with Jasmine?
Yes.
And in like the 11th hour, she got that craziest Ezekiel, right?
No,
is that the match I'm thinking?
That was WNO.
Okay, sorry, I was thinking of a different match.
That so we fought at.
That was wild.
That was wild, yeah. That was a good match. I got a little bit in my head with the first WNO thing too. I think
you
I was
mean just being on the stage?
Nervous. Yeah, I had never done WNO, and I was pretty nervous for that one.
Good for you though, because knowing that and being aware of that gives the opportunity to totally adjust it in the future. Yeah.
So I think for me, like the main thing I've been working on is mental, because I know in my heart that like I have the technique to beat anyone that I want to beat. It's just when I go there, I need to make sure that everything is fine-tuned in my mindset. So I've actually really been working on like in the training room. The most recent thing I've been working on is being meaner, as weird as that sounds. Like I tended to kind of have more of a letting people get guards back and not putting too much pressure and not going super hard because I don't want to be that person that's just going really hard. But I've really made a mental switch to just like when I go in there, like I'm visualizing like I'm going into a tournament. I'm really putting the pressure on. I'm using my strength. I'm going hard. Like, and so having that kind of like, that's how I train now. I feel like I'm going to come out with a lot more aggression and a lot more confidence in the moves that I'm doing. Because I think the main like falls that I've had competing have just been lack of confidence in my moves. Like I know I have the technique. I just need to have the confidence behind them to just go for it.
Do you think that like that person has always been inside of you, but you've suppressed it? Like I always wonder, why not, if you're in a sport that's super physical, right? Why not bring the killer out all the time? But you see this a lot. You see like it's almost like a courtesy or like a humility, but the humility spills into it. Now it's working against you.
Yeah, I think like for me, well, I'm like generally a very nice, kind of polite person off the mat.
Totally.
So it's hard for me to like feel like a bully. Like I don't want to feel like a bully.
I'm this.
And I don't want to make anyone feel sad because like I remember like coming up and training and like feeling sad when I would get my ass beat. Like I would be upset, you know?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's hard to like feel like you're going to do that to someone else. Like if I feel bad because I'm an empath, like I don't want to do that to anyone. So I've had to have a mindset switch to kind of detach like who I am off the mats with who I am on the mats. And now they have to be kind of two separate people.
Well, they have to be two separate people because the problem with your position is if you're like that and the other person isn't, again, there's this huge discrepancy because it doesn't mean the other person's a bully, but if they bring in that mentality and you're not matching it, it's like you're always battling that within the match itself. And that happens at like the hobbyist level. I totally understand what you're saying because like I don't think of myself as like an asshole, or if someone's hurt, I want to like make sure they're okay. Right. So even in the moments, it's extreme. I find myself being extremely selective with when I choose to like fully go. Like there's a few people that I trust and they trust me and it's like, okay, we can go to war. But I don't reach for that inherently, but I'll see other people that's just kind of like they step on the mat and they're just like that with everyone. And I don't think it's like a good or a bad thing, but I've been like, that I just wonder what it's like to always have that, like that kind of energy.
Yeah. You know? And what helped me kind of learn how to be like that was the girls that I train with. Like, I train with a few girls who are just, I used to consider them mean, but they just push it and they just train hard, and they're practicing that mindset. And they would, like, if I didn't match them, it didn't matter. They would, they would still go hard. They would still try to beat me up. So I had to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, well, if that's how they're training and they're having this success and I consider them really good, why don't I kind of take a step back and try to emulate that and just like stop holding back on all of those positions? Because it was really hard for me to let go and really go for it in the training room. But I think it's probably the thing that I was missing was that ability to let go.
How did that first happen? Like, how do you go from going into jiu-jitsu, someone whose mindset's being changed by the sport itself, and you're starting to feel like confidence change, or you're like, wow, this is changing the way that I think about food, or just like your whole person? What's the jump from those changes to be like, I'm going to be a competitor, and I'm not just doing like JJWL tournaments. I'm going like hard, and I'm going to go all the way to ADCC. I'm going to try to be like literally try to be one of the best in the world. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I never thought I was. It's funny because I literally could not even compete at first. Like, I would have like breakdowns about doing a naga. Like, I
Really?
hated it so much. Like, I hated it. But naturally, luckily, I'm an extremely competitive person. So once I kind of realized, I was like, oh, I'm kind of good at this. Once I started competing and I started winning a couple of tournaments, like as a white belt, I had a coach who was like, hey, you're really good at this. Like, you need to do this, and you need to actually like put a lot of effort into this, because I think you can be really, really good. Like, he told me this very early on, and I kind of hung on to that, and kind of just naturally being competitive, was happy to get better and happy to start pushing it and start going on that path. And then once I made the move to Atos and I was surrounded by people who were like world champions, I was like, oh wait, I'm with them. I can do that. Like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. That's so sick. You started at 16.
Yes.
And you got your black belt when you were 21.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's so cool. It's my one regret in life, and not even a big regret because things happen the way they are, is that I didn't do this sooner. Like, it just wasn't an option where I grew up.
That's what everyone says too.
Wasn't a martial art scene at all. As a town in Colorado, skiing was like the thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a good fit, and it plays so well into like that, exactly what you said, that desire to improve. And when you couple that with someone who believes in you, that combo is super special. And it's, as a athlete, having that relationship with someone is wild. What it can do to you, what it brings out of you that you didn't even know was in there, because it was all you pushing yourself for so long, and then someone comes along and they're like, hey, I'm seeing this from a different angle than you are.
Yeah. I mean, it blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm good at it? Like, what do you even mean?
Galvao who originally started to push you there?
My first coach, his name was Mike Wacker. I trained at a really small school in New York called Black Hole Jiu Jitsu. Yep. Really small school. And he was the first one who was like, hey, you're really good at this. I think you can be as good as you want to be at this. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that. And that was just crazy to me, because I had no self-confidence. Like, I didn't think I was like good at anything. I didn't think any of those types of thoughts. So to hear that, I was like, oh, okay. So like, I'll keep doing it then. Like, I'll try. Right. And then once I got to Atos, I met a bunch of really close friends, and all of them had that same thing. Like, hey, you're really good. Like, we think you can be amazing. We're all working as a team. You're surrounded by people who are like, they have that mindset that like, yes, I can be a champion. And they have that mindset with everyone else they're training with. So I started getting hyped up by all these friends and people I was meeting, and it kind of just led me to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. I would have never, ever, ever competed if other people weren't pushing me. Like, I never would have done anything with it.
The last tournament I did, it was the same thing. I had someone our academy was like really giving me a hard time. Like, dude, you need to do this. You need, and I had competed for so many years as a skier and off and on in jiu-jitsu for fun, but it became unfun for me to do that. And they had pushed me so hard. And I'm so glad that they did. I mean, it's such a good experience, and it never would have happened if it wasn't the push of a teammate. It's another one of those reasons why, like, the academy is a very special place, because people, they're people that it sounds like in your case are some of your best friends, but a lot of times it's not. It's people that you see, multiple times a week, but they know you a little bit. Like they do know, and they can push and pull parts out of you that it's a product of that type of environment. It's super special.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is too, like once you start competing, like, I have people who I've never met now who are like, oh, like, yeah, I've been watching you for a long time. Like, it's really cool. Like, my sister started training because of you, or like, I started training because of you. And I'm like, wait, like, what are you even talking about? Like, that never even was a thought to me. But I think that there's such a beautiful thing about just documenting your experience and pushing yourself, and it leads other people to do the same thing. And so that's really like the crazy thing about it.
I think that is one of the few positives of social media, is that you can be someone who's not around and not just jiu-jitsu, but you can be someone who's not around something and you're exposed to someone who is. And if that person, like yourself, happens to have a good message, right, and that connects, like, that's really powerful. There's having people reach out to you and say that must mean the world. Like, holy shit, I'm just out here like grinding, like getting my ass kicked every day, and here's some girl in Ohio who's like going to jiu-jitsu after school.
Right. But when I think about it, like when I was starting, I was also seeking that. Like,
totally.
When I saw my first like black belt female training, I was like, oh my God, like, you're such an inspiration. Like, that's amazing. And she's like, who are you? No.
Right.
But just seeing people's experience kind of makes you go, oh, should I try that? Maybe I can do that. And that alone is, I think, one of the benefits of social media and stuff like that.
With one last kind of big thought here, but being a highly competitive no-gi competitor, but jiu-jitsu really originating in the gi and receiving your black belt, like what does having received your black belt mean to you now that it's happened? Because that's such, for people that start, right, many people start and they get attached to, and I think it's totally fine, the stripes and the belts and the advancement. At some point that changes, and it just kind of like, you're just in it because usually almost anyone who's like a purple belt or brown belt, you don't care anymore. You just love jiu-jitsu. You're going to come no matter what. They could take all the belts away. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to go. But did that mean anything different to you? What was that moment like? Because the video is great. I mean, it's like, it's heartfelt. It's emotional. You're very transparent and honest in the video itself, and I think there's some really good points there. But now being removed from that day, is there any significance to a different belt wrapped around your waist?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was never attached to the belt, especially because I honestly haven't even been training that long comparatively to a lot of people.
6 years, right?
Yeah, so I wasn't even thinking, like, it scared me when I knew I was going to get my black belt. But for me, it meant, like, it's just a huge challenge in front of me. It's a huge challenge of like, okay, now you're really going to test how much you believe in yourself. You're really going to test like those goals that you've been thinking of, those dreams that you've had. You're really going to put it to the test and see where you can push yourself. So I knew I wanted to be the best, but when I'm hanging out at brown belt, it's still this kind of like far off kind of thought. I'm like, oh, still a brown belt, that stuff's way in the future. But now I'm there. So now every day I'm faced with like, the competition I'm going to go to, it's not just going to be a bunch of brown belts. I can get world champs in any single competition I do. Yeah. So it's just like this added level of pressure that I really, really thrive on, because anytime I've ever made a huge like amount of progress in my life, it's been in a situation where I'm extremely uncomfortable and I'm almost borderline unsure if I can do it. And I have to push through that kind of point and prove to myself that I can. So getting your black belt is kind of a huge version of that. And I think it's a great mental kind of challenge. Like I'm excited because it's making me level up in all of these different ways that I kind of could just put to the side before.
I think that it also represents like you've seen something through, and there's a value there that I just think that's a good characteristic to have. It's nice when you say you're going to meet people for dinner that you show up. If someone asks you to do something, you say yes. It's good that you just do that. Like, even if it's not what you want to do, you said you would. And when you sign up, you don't say that you're going to train all the way to black belt, but doing that is like, it's nothing about it's so much about your character at that point, I think, and a lot less about your skill, because everyone's good at that point, you know?
Right. I agree. I also think that as far as self-confidence, there's a huge, just like what you were saying, when you follow through with commitments to yourself, like I feel like that's really the way to develop self-love and self-confidence, because you're setting these goals for yourself, and every time you accomplish one of them, you're trusting yourself more that you're going to follow through with things.
Right.
So getting a black belt is like, hey, you followed through for years over and over and over and over to all of these commitments that you said you were going to follow through with. Yep. And it's hard to not gain a huge amount of self-confidence from that, as well as just characteristics as far as how you deal with other people too.
And all the time you're doing that, the door to leave's right there. Like, right there. It's open, wide open. You can walk out anytime you want. No one's going to say otherwise, right?
I mean, we had all the excuses in the world. We had COVID. You know, we had all of these excuses that you could say, oh, well, I don't have time for this. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. But you went every single day until that point, and it's a huge honor to be able to reach that point.
Do you want to train or compete in gi at all still?
Yeah, I have up until... I still did in brown belt. I think the last one I did was Europeans last year. I think I got second or something like that. I do want to compete in gi. I want to do gi worlds next year. I just really, really want to win trials. And after trials, I'm like, okay, I'll compete in the gi. But I know I want to win ADCC. So I'm really dead set on winning ADCC.
I'm conflicted because you and Jasmine are just rad. I had her on the show too, and it's going to be even more fun for me to watch the trials because it's two good people, but it's going to be, I mean, this leading up to 2024, I think it's going to be a trip watching that event, because watching the 2022, I was like, dude, this is nuts. This event is so much bigger than itself right now. Like, it's crazy. I mean, it was so well produced. It was so well advertised. It was streamed well. Like, even little things that like kind of don't really always line up with jiu-jitsu were just like, ba-bam, ba-bam.
Exactly. And I think it's the future.
Totally. It is. It's going to be really, really sick. Okay. Super closing thought, because I want to be respectful of your time. Okay. We went to Germany, Berlin, Munich, and then we went to Prague. Every single day I had a beer and ate just like whatever the hell I wanted, like trucking sausages. We did like sauerkraut. We did everything every single day. Zero change in like body weight.
Zero. Every time I've been to Europe.
In digestion.
Yep.
Every sleep. Like I looked for training, you know, every city that we're in, and it was just such a fiasco trying to make it happen. So in addition to that, 10 days also didn't strength train, also didn't train jiu-jitsu. Came back like lighter and better digestion and everything. Yep. What the fuck?
Dude, I don't know what's in our food. There's a lot of problems with the American food source. This is the thing. No, but it's a thing. It's every time I've been to Europe, I come back, I've lost like an actual amount of weight, like 5 pounds or something crazy. And I'm eating a lot. I'm eating things that I wouldn't normally eat. I'm not working out as much. It doesn't even matter. I could eat whatever I wanted. I come back, I'm like, I'm skinnier. I don't understand what's going on. And then here, I'm like all religious, trying to focus on like the best quality meat. But it doesn't matter. Something's in the system. Like, okay,
I just wanted to make sure, as a German and like someone who thinks about food and someone who thinks about training and all this stuff, that's not like a fluke. But I was just like blown away. You've been to Germany, obviously?
I have, yes.
So rad.
Amazing. Like, did you go to some of the castles?
We went to
crazy castles everywhere.
We went to Berlin and Munich, and it was like
Berlin's
just
a crazy
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. The food in Munich was like just
I could feel my ancestral roots, just so happy to bratwurst every day.
I love like sauerkraut anyway, but we were at this like beer garden, and we ordered it. And I had never been served sauerkraut yet in Germany. And so she like put the sausage and the mustards and everything on a plate and gave me that. And I was like, well, you know, kind of like, hey, I had ordered sauerkraut. And before I could say anything, she turned around and she just grabbed like raw tongs, sour, and gave me like a whole plate. And I was kind of like, whoa, that's a lot. But then I ate it. I'm like, oh my God, this is the best I've ever had, by far. And two, like fermented foods are incredibly good for you. So I swear that there was something with that.
No, there has to be. I mean, you think of like people who eat like a lot of kimchi, like any culture that naturally has a large amount of fermented foods, like that's definitely for a reason. And what do we have for that? Like naturally.
Like McDonald's? I don't
know.
Like
kombucha? Like $6 a bottle? I'm good. I would rather eat like plates of sauerkraut.
Well, we'll close on the plates of sauerkraut comment because, like I said, I have very important things to attend to. I have a board and Bruse sandwich that I need to eat.
Amazing. Yes.
And Amanda, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. So much that we got to talk about. I'm going to definitely be watching the ADCC trials, gunning for you guys, and we'll have to do this again in the future.
Yes, thank you so much. I had a great time talking.
And it worked.
It worked.
How about that? I mean,
no technical problems.
I feel pretty good.
Thank you.
All right.